In this module, we are going to discuss about HTML basics. So as many times mentioned earlier, HTML means hypertext markup language. Hypertext, we already know that a set of documents on the World Wide Web which are interconnected. So this interconnected linking part, how that is done, that we'll see later. But the basic idea is that it is a set of documents where this language HTML helps us in annotating that or marking up that, and that's why this is called a markup language. So basically HTML is a markup language used for structuring the contents of a web page. Now what does that mean? Which means that, let's say some primitive HTML we wrote in one of the last sessions, where we are saying that okay, this whole HTML document is there, but I am annotating, I am marking that this part is my body, right? And again we mentioned that it can have nested, this is called tag. Now this thing is directly a text content inside this tag, but we earlier saw also that there can, and we'll see again, that there can be many other tags, nested tags, flat hierarchy, those sort of things can be there. So everywhere we are annotating that what are those groups of tags, group of texts, what do they mean. That is what annotating mean, right? And as we saw earlier, that this thing would simply translate to something like this, that when we are running it locally, then simply hello world is printed. A better example would be, let's say we go to some example.com, and here we see that okay, this is also a text, this is also a text, and this is a link, but we can see that this text is sort of a, looks like a main heading, right? And that's why we say internally in the HTML document we have annotated that this thing is a heading, this thing is sort of a paragraph, this thing is a link, and the link visible part of the link information is more information. But when you click this, then it is going to some URL which is something like this, inna.org domains/result, right? So all these things are somehow annotated in its HTML, and that is what we can see here, right? So when you right click and see view source, you can see its source, and we will come across some of them very soon. But for now we can see that okay, this is example domain. Now you see that here example domain is written, and it is in something called h1 tag, it is wrapped around, right? Which means that it is a heading. Okay, now this thing is wrapped around p tag, which means that it is a paragraph, right? Similarly we'll see that this for more information, this thing is somewhere near here where it is in a tag. A tag means anchor tag, as we'll see later, and this something called href is there, right? We'll see that this is basically reference, hyperlink reference. So we call that this is HTML is a hypertext document, right? And this is hyperlink. So this is the hyperlink which we are talking about, which means that this is a link which points to this separate URL. So as we mentioned earlier, when we clicked on this, then we went to this URL. So all this information is annotated, is marked in this HTML, and that's why we'll see we see that why this is called hypertext markup language. Now this word elements I have used many times by now, and sometimes I have used the word tags. So we'll see soon that what is the difference between them and how they are composed of. But basically the idea is that an HTML document is made up of various elements, and for example we'll take that okay, here this whole thing can be considered an element. Similarly here this whole thing can be considered an element. So as we will see that these are tags, these are opening and closing tags, and this whole thing, the combined, like the body, opening, closing, the whole thing, entire thing is called tag. Now as we can see that these are there can be many tags at the same level, there can be nesting of tags, all these things will soon come to it. But the point is that the tags are a very central part to the whole HTML document, right? So just I wanted to highlight that they assign when an element is there, then basically it is applied to various parts of the HTML content, where we try to assign different meaning to the HTML document. And that is exactly what we saw, that this element is assigning the meaning that this thing is a heading, this thing is assigning a meaning that this thing is a paragraph. So now you understood what are tags. Now this is the repetition of the fact that we are trying to justify that is it a paragraph, is it a list, is it a table, is it a heading, is it a link. So in that sense we are trying to assign different meanings using annotation, right? Okay, now we'll go to different elements definitely one by one, but here I would like to mention just in passing that what are the different types, various types of contents on a web page can be there. Now earlier definitely we saw a couple of them already, right? This is heading, this is paragraph, this is link. So you can see that paragraph, heading, link. Similarly there can be list, sort of bullet points, like for example in this here you can see that something bulleted points. So similarly in HTML document, let's say some bulleted points are there, they can be lists. Sometimes those list of bulleted points, they are, rather than bullets, they are numbers, right? So they are ordered list and unordered list, that those things we'll see soon. Obviously images, a web page contains a lot of images, so images can be elements. Audio, video, these can be embedded inside the HTML, so definitely those things will also be separate HTML tags. Apart from that, forms, buttons, and lots of more HTML elements are there. But just I wanted to give a overview that when we say elements, what do we mean by that? We are meaning that something is a heading, something is a paragraph, right? These elements are going to justify that this section is annotated as heading, or this section is annotated as paragraph in that section. And such type of elements, there are lots and lots of it in HTML. We will see most of them are like pretty simple, some of them have some nuances, and we'll cover them as required. Whatever detail is required, that we'll cover, take each of them, and we'll definitely discuss them one by one. So this is what I was talking about, that when we try to dig into the structure of a particular element, then we'll see that any element includes an opening tag, some enclosed content inside that tag, and closing tag. So as we saw earlier also, that something like if this P is paragraph is starting, this paragraph is ending, and this part is the body of the paragraph, right? In a similar manner you can see that this paragraph is starting, ending, and something can be there inside that, and that is basically the called the enclosed content. And that later we will see that this enclosed content can be text content, this enclosed content can be nested other elements also. So for example here we will see that this is the starting div. So div is sort of a short for division, so like P is for paragraph, div is for division. So we'll definitely look at it later, but the point is that this is a tag which is starting tag, this is a ending tag. Now as h1 tag or P tag contain, the body of that contains text, right? Similarly here the body of div tag contains a set of other elements, and that's what I was saying earlier, that the enclosed content can be text, or they can be nested elements again inside that tag. So this terminology is important, that there is an element, it consists of these things. Now this beginning tag and opening tag and closing tag, these are tags. So something which is starting with angle bracket and some tag name is there. So these things are called tags, but this part where the whole angle bracket is there, but if angle bracket is not there, whatever is just the name of the tag, that is what we are talking, that this is a p tag or div. Whenever we say that it is a p tag or img image tag or div tag, then it means they are talking about the name of the tag. And when we use that name of the tag in conjunction with angle brackets like starting or closing, then that is called a tag. And what is the difference between starting and closing tag? Starting tag will have an angle bracket at both sides. The closing tag will start with angle bracket and forward slash and end with angle bracket. So this sort of structure and this sort of a structure, they are called tags. And in between whatever is the name, that is called a tag name. So by now we have understood that most of the things in HTML is just a tag. The whole HTML thing is a tag. In fact, the root is a starting tag with HTML, which is like closing with /HTML. Again, the body part is, and we saw earlier the head part is, all these are again elements which are starting. So for example, body is starting with body tag, body is ending with this body tag, and this whole thing is body element. And again, the whole thing which is visible, either this or this, the whole thing which is visible is inside the body. The head part is not visible, we mentioned. However, we will come back to that again, but that is what we discussed till now. Now we are saying that let's go slightly more detail in about the tags which we mentioned. So for example, here we saw that okay, these things are built from these tags, but we will see some of the characteristics, that sometimes the opening tag can contain some attributes, right? The first of the examples which we saw was here, where the anchor tag was also having some attribute. So this thing where, so most of the many places it is not there, some places it is there, many places it is not there. So for example, here in div, paragraph, this heading, at these places we are not having attributes, but sometimes and this will only be there in the opening tag, it will never be in the closing tag, right? The opening tag sometimes might contain something which is called an attribute, and we can have multiple of them. So this is one, then again it can be space separated and something like this. You see here, we'll come back to these tags later, but I'm just giving an example. What do you mean by multiple attributes in a tag? So this meta tag is starting. Now you see that this is an attribute. Again, this is an attribute. All these things, right? So now you understand what is an attribute. Then we will see that the attribute consists of two parts. This is the key of the attribute and this is the value of the attribute. Similarly, here this is the key of the attribute, this is the value of the attribute. Okay, here we will see that the key of the attribute is href and value is this whole URL. So now you have a fair idea that what is an attribute. So basically, what is attribute doing? In a sense, anywhere, wherever we are using attributes, what are they doing essentially? They are doing either of these two things. Either they change the behavior of the element or they provide additional information or metadata. So here we saw that it is changing the behavior, which means that if I pass this URL, then this link's behavior is something. If I pass a different URL, then the behavior of this link is different. So in this case, the href is changing the behavior of anchor tag, which is the link tag. Sometimes the behavior is not changed, but simply we provide some additional data. So for example, let's say Here one of the places we saw, let's say name is equal to. So this is basically just saying that there can be multiple meta tags with various names. So the name, it is a metadata, right? So the coincidentally the name of the tag is also meta, but the point is not that. The point is that any attribute which is there that can provide some metadata. For example, here we see that okay, there can be 10 paragraph tags in my HTML document, but I am putting id is equal to this my para in this tag, in this element. This is the tag, this is the tag, the whole thing is an element. Now there can be 5 paragraph elements with different IDs. So what is ID doing? ID is trying to provide some metadata about this paragraph, which means that if this paragraph has id my para and some other paragraph has id something else, let's say xyz, then basically what we are trying to say that these id attributes are providing some information, some metadata about this element or tag, whatever you say. So in that sense, we will see that these can be of many things. So for example, one of the examples we saw here, the other example we saw here in anchor tag. Now one of the examples can be button tag, which we will see later. That a button tag in on itself, if there is nothing, no let's say attribute is passed, then in on itself it will just show a button, but it will not do anything. So let me show you something like that. So let's say this whole thing, paragraph, right? I can show you an example here that this hello world, which was written directly inside body, I can write it in p tag, and if we see, then it will be almost like that only, because we did not change anything, just we moved it to a paragraph, so it will not be visible that much in the HTML document rendered. But now if you see that if you write some button and say click me, right, now this thing definitely will be rendered. See, it will be rendered, but actually nothing is happening. Nothing will happen by on clicking this, because we have not said anything what to do, right? And that's where attributes come into picture. Like in links, you can say that on clicking this link what will happen, and that is given by href, hyperlink reference. Similarly, in button you can say that on clicking what should happen, that you can give by on click attribute. And later we will see that these are functions which we will discuss in JavaScript, and you can define those functions and put their name here. So what will happen, that when you click this button, then this function in JavaScript will be called, which will come to later. Right now the point is to make you understand that there is something called attribute which might change the behavior of an element, like in the second case, or provide some additional metadata like in the first case. Now another point which I wanted to mention is something called tag hierarchy. Now this already we have seen many times, right, by now, that we have seen that tags can contain obviously body, starting tag, ending tag, and the element will contain some enclosed content within the starting and closing tag. However, those enclosed content can be simply text like this, or can be some other elements, which by which I mean something like this, that there can be some tag and the body is not text like this, body is another element again, and this need not be we need not stop here. So again this paragraph can again have nested, that is another thing. Secondly, this thing can one, let's say div tag, does not mean that it will have only one, it might have multiple elements directly under div. So we saw here, right, that here div is having at first level, it is having this h1 element at the first level, again just below that at the same level it is having this level. But here if you see that, okay, it is having a paragraph, and inside paragraph again another array. So this is an example of that thing which I am saying, that not only this thing can contain text, it can contain elements, and not only that, it can contain elements which again contain elements, and that is where the whole structure is coming into shape, because that is how we are going to build HTML documents. HTML documents, as the this is like very simple. This is like slightly complicated, but still very very simple, right? As we go to complex web pages, then this sort of nesting will become essential, right? Because we are going to compose various elements among each other to get the structure what we want inside the HTML document, and later we will see how to style them. But the point you're understanding that some this sort of thing is not only possible, in fact it is the fundamental way in which we will try to create various types of structures inside HTML document. Now this I highlighted earlier also, but let me highlight it again. The order of closing of tags is very important, otherwise the HTML will become invalid, okay, even though the browser might not give any error. So what we mean by that is that let's say something like this is there, and right now the browser is rendering this. Let's try to make the order of closing of the tags, which means that let's try to have more than one tags. So apart from p tag, we can have a normal let's say div tag. You'll see what is div tag and difference with respect to p tag. But let's say I have some div tag and I have some header tag, right? And it says hello. So if I render this, then there should be a header saying hello, and it is header, so it should be slightly large, and then there should be normal hello world in normal font, right? So when you refresh it, you see that this is what I expected, and this is what it has come out to be. That is fine. Now, by order of closing of tags, I am saying that whenever you are doing various tags, then you might you definitely should see that, okay, when h1 is starting, then firstly h1 should close, then only div should start, and then div should close, right? So for example, here when body is starting, then after that if h1 has started, then body cannot close until and unless h1 closes. Similarly, right now body is open, but then div has also opened, so until unless div has not closed, body cannot close. So this sort of structure, let me give you an example. So this sort of structure, you can imagine that something like HTML tag is there, right? And then I am having on top of it HTML is started, and then a body tag is started. Now when once body tag is started, then you can consider it like a stack. So let's say stack, by stack I mean that, let's say this is like base and you are keeping things on top of it, right? And stack means that whatever you are putting on top, firstly that can go. It's not that I am putting x and on top of x I am putting y, on top of y I am putting z, then you cannot remove x, right? Firstly you have to remove z, and then you can remove y. So this sort of structure, which in computer science it is called a stack, but here I mean that we can use a sort of this sort of structure to understand that how this closing and opening will happen, rather than getting confused and remembering a lot of rules. This thing is like pretty simple. So HTML is starting, then until unless it is closed, just keep it in stack. Body is starting, now h1 is starting, so anything which is starting, just put it on top of a stack. So h1 is starting, that is fine. Now h1 is closing, see, now h1 is closing, that is fine. Anything which is on top of a stack can close, right? That is only the rule of thumb you have to remember. So h1 is on top, and that's why h1 can close. And what does this signify? See, stack signifies that whatever is at the top, that is the most recent. And the order of closing of tags is also the same rule, that whatever is just recently opened, that should be closed first. And that's why this data structure is useful in analyzing HTML. Now h1 is closing, that is perfectly fine, because h1 is at the top. But after that, now div started, so now div is at the top, so like the most recent tag. Now div is closing, yeah, that is fine. So I can close the div, and it is removed, and then body is closing. Yeah, so I can remove body. Whenever I close any tab I remove, and then finally HTML is closing. So HTML is removed, and when at the end the whole stack is finished, which means that the document is valid. In fact, there are ways, online services, where you can directly verify the validity of a particular HTML document. So for example, let's say we have written something like this, then we can go to online HTML validator, something like this, right? And this W3C, this is like official website. W3C is official website of World Wide Web. So definitely you can put a URL of any website, or you can upload, but we'll use this part where we can directly paste our HTML, right? And then we can check that whether this thing is valid or not. So when you go scroll, then it will show that what are the errors in this HTML document. So actually these are known errors for our HTML document, but these are like sort of declaration or so these errors are not that big deal. So for example, one of the errors what they are saying is that, see, HTML, this head is missing. This we already know that head right now we have not created, we have not learned it, right? That's why we have not written it. So that you can ignore. Similarly, they are saying something like lang you have to pass here, so that you can ignore. And there's something called Doctype which we have not read right now, which says what is the version of HTML. HTML has many versions. The thing which we are learning is called HTML5, which is the latest version, and that's what we'll be learning. But there are earlier versions, HTML 4.x and something like that. So those things, if you don't say anything, how browser will know that what version of HTML you are writing? And what is the difference between those versions? There are slight nuances which I will discuss later, but that is not the point here. The point is that when you are checking at this point of time the validity of your document, please ignore these sort of three warnings. Now I will show you what I was mentioning earlier about closing of tags, right? So now you tell me that if let's say I move this tag to here, is that valid? Yes, that is still valid, right? Simply you remove tags from here to there, then it becomes invalid. It is not the case right now it is still valid. Just the difference is that earlier heading was closing here only, and then the separate hello world word was there, right? Now what is happening is that we are saying that h1 is starting, heading is starting, and start another div while heading is still on, which means that this thing is now part of the heading, because heading is starting here and heading is closing here, which means that this whole part is heading, right? And that's what we will see. That when we refresh, then we'll see that earlier hello world, which was like normal text, now it has become also like heading sort of thing, right? Why? Because we have closed it heading after that. So now you're understanding the structure, right? That till the time it is closing, that behavior, the effect of that thing will remain. However, just for your information, if I see its validity, then I'll see that actually one extra error has come. See, only 3 were there. This extra error, it is saying that element div not allowed as child of element h1. But so basically this div is a child of element h1. Actually this thing is not allowed. So basically what is generally allowed is that inside h tag only inline element should be there, but div is something called which is block element, and that's why that error is coming. But what is inline and what is block elements, we will come to that later. But in general you understand that div sort of things cannot be inside header. But you see that browser did not give any error. Browser, so that's what when I mentioned earlier also, that these browsers are very forgiving. In fact, they will never crash. They will never crash here. They will not say that your HTML is valid and it will be a blank page. It will never happen, because browsers know that HTML might be somewhat here and there. I have to try my best to show to the user whatever possible. So so don't bother that it is correct in whatever you are trying to do, that is correct in the browser. That is not the way. In fact, once you develop your proper HTML, then after that it is a good practice to see these warnings and errors whatever, so that they will give you a better idea. So in that strict sense, my current HTML is also not valid. But still, this is like not a big deal, because this should not be inside that. But still, if I put, then that's not a big deal. In fact, it is rendering also properly. But that is not the point. My point was that even if this thing is like semantically wrong, and that's why they are giving that error, my point of doing that demonstration was around closing of tags, right? So even if like that one error, extra error came, that you can ignore, but the point is that still the closing of the tags is perfectly fine. You see, body is opening, h1 is opening, and then div is opening. Once div is opening, firstly div is closing, and then h1 is closing, and then body is closing. So it is perfectly fine, right? So order of closing is perfectly fine. Now if I say that if I do something like this, I remove this div tag and I put it here. Now do you think that now this thing is a valid HTML? Now it is not. You see why? You see that body is opening, h1 is opening, then div is opening. Then firstly div has to close. Whatever is the most recent tag open, firstly that has to close. That is the rule we heard right earlier, that whatever the most recent tag is open, firstly that has to close, then only we can move to anything. Now if we try to see its validity, then just see what will happen. See, we will see that okay, lots of errors have come right now. So obviously this till here it was there, but now you see these extra 3 errors are there, and they are saying exactly what we have done mistake. End tag h1 seen, but there were open elements. Obviously, you are trying to end h1 tag, but already div is open. How you can close h1 tag until unless div you close? And that's what this thing is trying to say. Okay, say unclosed element div. Yeah, so you have closed this thing, so this thing is closed here. Now where did you close div? You did not close, right? So that's what it is saying, that the unclosed element div. And later it is saying that a stray end tag div. So basically it is saying that, and what is this? What is this? Like this div closing tag, like somewhere, like there's no, it has no business being here, right? And that's what it is saying, that stray end tag div. So you understand that obviously you will do your own validations, but from this exercise you understood that how the tags should be closed. That is the first thing. Second thing is that at the end, whatever to the best of your ability you have done that, at the end it is a good practice to just go and have a look at the HTML validator page, so that you can have a better idea if by mistake you did something wrong. So I told that there is an HTML validator service, and you can use that for validating your HTML. And one thing I would like to highlight here is that, okay, so we right now saw that this HTML is like completely messed up. Even tags are not properly there, right? We saw like lots of errors are there. But what do you think browser will do with this sort of thing? Let's see. When you go to the browser and you refresh, okay, it still works fine. It still shows you something, and it is like even if so actually you see that even if the HTML is completely wrong, the browser is like very forgiving. Browser is just trying to make somewhat sense for you. So what it is doing, that it is starting h1, that is fine, hello, and then again so it is saying that okay, this thing is also h1 because it has not closed. And then when you are closing h1 na, then it is saying that okay, so some mistake in markup is there, but definitely if h1 is closing, then div should be closed. So browser itself assumes that okay, I will close it. internally. So it ignores, even it knows that you have done some mistake, and it renders like that. So it tries to make the best sense of what is the best view it can show in spite of all the HTML errors. So that's what I told you earlier. The browser is very forgiving. It will never crash, or whatever HTML you write, it will never crash in that sense. Now, so now let's just keep a simple p tag, let's say. That should be fine for now. And we are trying to understand somewhat more into tags. But one of the before going into detail into various other tags, one of the first types of tags, which is like technically like it's not a tag, but technically it is a tag, which is basically comments. So comment is written something like this. Comments are basically parts of HTML which is not markup, but just for information purpose, or like for the reader of that HTML. It is not something which has to be rendered by the browser. So like if you have done programming in any other language, then you might remember that okay, you might have double slash to do a comment in some programming languages, right? In some programming languages it is a simple pound symbol, hash symbol. In some programming languages, single line support is not there, but definitely in many programming languages, the multi-line support comment, something like this is there. So you can understand that okay, these things are programming languages, but HTML is also sort of a markup language. Like here also we are writing something, we might also need to say that okay, I want to say that this is body, this thing is body, just for information purpose, so that other people who are who are reading my HTML, they can understand that. So for that you can do something like this, that if it starts with angle bracket exclamation mark hyphen hyphen, then it is the beginning of the comment, and after that the ending of the comment is hyphen hyphen angle bracket close, which means that if I can say something like this, that this is my, let's say, body. Okay, now somebody who is writing who is reading your HTML, they can understand that okay, so this part is body. More importantly, this thing is available in your view source also. See, so in view source also it is available, so anybody who is reading this can make sense of it. Obviously it will not be rendered this is my body, like nowhere this is there. So basically this thing is just a comment which will be ignored by HTML, but this is for our purpose, sort of documentation or something like that. Now one more thing I wanted to highlight is that this thing is a multi-line. You can understand it like some programming languages have slash star thing, right, which is multi-line. So and you can write a single line comment also here, right, and you can write multi-line comment also in those programming languages, whatever. If you're not knowing any programming language, don't get confused, but I'm just saying that multi-line comment can be also there, right? But the point is that this same structure is followed here also, right? That you can do something like this also, that this is my body, and still this is fine. So that's what I'm trying to say, that this can be a multi-line comment or a single line comment, that both are fine. See, in this case also, if you refresh, go to the page source, then it is valid, right? That's green thing, whatever, if in general in Chrome, in view source, whatever is green elements are there, those are basically the comment elements, which are like basically ignored by the HTML renderer. This is just for our purpose. Okay, so this we have understood. The main idea is that this any comment should start with angle bracket exclamation mark hyphen hyphen, and it should end with hyphen hyphen angle bracket. Now you can see that if you, let's say, even if you do a single character mistake here, something like this, let's say like this, then what is happening? Hyphen hyphen and closing angle bracket, that is not there. So that is not there, which means that till it encounters that thing, it sees that everything is a comment, and in this case, our case, like the whole thing, the whole document is a comment. You can see that now nothing is there, because now browser sees that okay, there is nothing. Why? Because it will see that the whole document is commented, right? So just wanted to say that until unless this thing will come, this comment will not be closed. That's a small point, right? So it has come back, and that is I wanted to highlight here.